not being American in these increasingly chaotic times could be quite the benefit for someone who wants to do business around the world, invest around the world, be accepted to live around the world. I don't know what's next, but we've been through a pandemic. We've been through a dramatic crackdown on freedoms. Is a great world war next? I don't want to be in the United States. I don't want to be in legacy brand countries paying high taxes, waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Andrew, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to meet you in person at the Nomad Capitalist event. And so I'd like to ask you first why you do everything that you do to help people be able to move and be more flexible all over the world.
Well, I think the world is in an incredibly chaotic time right now. I think that the world is incredibly fractious and fractured, and people need options. When I was 12 years old, my father said, listen, you're going to be an entrepreneur. This country is heading in the wrong direction, the United States. You ought to go where you're treated best. Don't worry about staying at home and taking care of mom and dad. We're going to take care of ourselves. And you go out and you find wherever it is. For us, it was the United States. My parents were born in the 50s. I mean, they lived through a great time to be an American, but he said that's changing. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen that. And I think you've seen it both from the left and from the right. I was a guy who always lived in the United States, and I didn't agree with everything the Republicans said, but I was a business guy, and I said, all right, fine, lower taxes, get the economy going, great. But I look today and I say, I can't identify with the other side. Mm-hmm. I think that they're all crazy. And I gave up my U.S. citizenship. Now, most people don't have to do that. But I look at that and I say, not being American in these increasingly chaotic times could be quite the benefit for someone who wants to do business around the world, invest around the world, be accepted to live around the world. I don't know what's next. We've been through a pandemic. We've been through a dramatic crackdown on freedoms. Is a great world war next? I don't want to be in the United States. I don't want to be in legacy brand countries paying high taxes, waiting for the next shoe to drop. And so what I tell people is have a portfolio of passports, have money diversified around the world, have places that you can go. Even if you're not going to move now, be ready to go. And if you want to go now, you can save a lot of money because the governments are wasting your tax dollars. So it's all about having options. And I think there's never been a greater time to have options.
Well, just for a little bit, I agree with you, by the way, 100%, and I'm excited to learn a lot more from you. But can you tell people you said a legacy brand country. So can you explain what that is for our viewers?
It's the Coca-Cola of countries. It's the Louis Vuitton of countries. I mean, does Louis Vuitton make the best bags? Is Coca-Cola the best drink? They have great marketing. They've been around for a long time. And people naturally flock to them. And so they have a legacy brand. They've had it for years. I mean, one can argue the United States is one of the best marketing experiments in the history of mankind. I mean, even, learning in history class, going back to the 1800s, the streets are paved with gold. Everybody's moving to the United States because the streets are paved with gold. And what do they say? Not only were they not paved with gold, they weren't paved at all. And I was expected to pave them. So there's been this great marketing experiment going on from the beginning of the country that people have bought into. Now, I think that smart people are increasingly going elsewhere. I was just in Dubai. I think you see a lot of people from Eastern Europe, South Asia in particular, going there. People who are talented, they can have, very low taxes, if any taxes at all. They can have a nice lifestyle. Some of those people are very talented, and maybe 30 years ago, they would have wanted to come to the United States. They increasingly want to go somewhere else. And just, whether you like Trump or not, the policies now, I think, are pushing a lot of people away from wanting to immigrate. So what you're left with is a country that has this great brand of everyone who wants to move there. And yet who wants to move there is, people from Central America who are escaping violence. One could argue violence created by the U.S. government and the drug war, but they're escaping violence and they want to go and they want to get a job, cleaning someone's home. Respectable, but not exactly the top tier talent that's going to take your country to the next level. And so I think that we're seeing over a long course of time, legacy brand countries are losing their luster. And yet, particularly the people living in them, still hold on to that brand, still hold on to the marketing in the same way that I grew up watching Coca-Cola advertisements on TV, and I still drink Coca-Cola. The advertising worked. It takes a long time to change people's perceptions. It's gradually happening, but I think a lot of Americans still think everyone wants to come here. I'm living proof. Not only do a lot of Americans want to leave, but a lot of talented people elsewhere are not even considering going to the US. But there's this legacy brand that persists. And you could say the same thing about the UK, Australia, et cetera. They're expensive. The things they claim to offer, they don't really offer. Freedom of speech. I mean, all that's dead, but the brand lives on.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift. And,
Yeah.
though, also, I think that the standard of living, because of the U.S. exceptionalism, because of our position as the world reserve currency, I mean, I've traveled a bit, not in the, I'm so excited to be able to go to Malaysia, and I am planning also to go to Cambodia while I'm there. But the standard of living here has been higher than most other places in the world. Although, do you see that shifting as well?
Well, I haven't lived in the United States for, I mean, close to a decade and a half. But I talk to people and I hear what's happening. And I read the news. I read newspapers all over the world. What's happening in these legacy brand countries, particularly the US? Things are increasingly unaffordable. Now, the average person thinks that's because of capitalism and private industry. I would argue it's because the government, they don't build enough housing. They've done a terrible job managing the economy. They do things that are inflationary. I mean, you know this better than anybody. But what I also think is I've lived, we have our event, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's in Malaysia for the third year. I've had a home in Malaysia. I've lived there part-time for 11 years. And that's one reason I want to show it to people. If you would have gone there 30 years ago, you wouldn't want to live in Kuala Lumpur. Right now, I just had one of my personal assistants come, and she's new, and we were in Kuala Lumpur, and she said, where's, she wanted to look at for like a Prada store. I said, oh, there's four within a kilometer of the house. Which mall do you want to go to? I mean, you never would have seen that 30 years ago, but there's incredible wealth that's being built in places like Malaysia that people don't realize. That's why they're not a legacy brand country. They're an underrated country because they don't get enough credit for being as livable as they are. Great weather, great food, kind people. Yes, a majority of the population is Muslim. They will tell you, and I've had people come who are, transgendered and everything that, you think would be an issue. And they said, people told me it's none of our business. If you're part of our religion, you should adhere to our faith. If you're not part of our religion, you should do whatever you want, and we're not going to judge you for that. I can't convince people of that. I've only seen it for 11 years of my life. But the point is, if you look at a country like Malaysia, they're accumulating more of the wealth. Now, wealth isn't a zero-sum game, but I mean, they're moving up. And I think that a lot of people in the West don't understand that a guy like me who runs a global business would rather hire someone in Malaysia or the country of Georgia, where I spend time, or Colombia, where we've got some of the best English speakers I've ever met. I'd rather hire them at an incredible salary for what they live, much less than I would pay someone in the US, none of the baggage or the taxes of hiring in the US. And I get much more worldly people to work for my company. Those are, in my case, 100 fewer jobs that are being created in the country that I was born in. At scale, that has to have an impact. And so what you're seeing is these countries are coming closer together in terms of their livability. And as a result, people can't afford rent. People can't afford eggs. You go to Mexico, eggs are 80% less than the US right now.
Right.
I'd rather be in Mexico than the US. And I think that politically speaking, people who can't afford this anymore, the government's not going to force me to hire 100 people in the US to drive up wages. The US just isn't as competitive anymore. And so people are going to have less livability, and people in Malaysia are going to have more livability. And it just, until it becomes rather equal.
So what you're saying is that there's a shift with those countries that have not had the standard of living that we've enjoyed in the U.S. And at the same time, those that are at the U.S., I mean, definitely their standard of living is declining. And, I don't know really exactly what the answer to that is, other than universal money, global money. I mean, that's really where I come from. But we talk about, well, what do you think about the gold card that is proposed by President Trump to
Yeah.
everybody's going to flock to the U.S. and pay all of this money at the same time we know that the issues that he has around border and immigration?
Listen, I'm a big believer in immigration, and I'm a believer in talented and wealth immigration. I mean, it is a global race for
I agree.
wealth and for talent. And this idea that we don't want people buying their way in. I mean, you have countries in Europe that have golden visa programs. You have Malta, which has a citizenship program. You donate money, 750,000 euros. They give you citizenship. You have to spend a couple of weeks there. And now you're European. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. But what we're seeing is couple dozen countries now have some way to get citizenship on a fast track to be one of them and be able to have that option. It's hard with some of the Trump proposals because there's often not a lot of context and they walk stuff back. I mean, we talked about this travel ban and how that could impact second citizenship. And then they came out and said, no, that's not a real thing. That's fake news. But paying $5 million, there was some talk that, oh, you'd be exempted from tax. You'd have basically a territorial tax system, they call it, which is what Malaysia has, for example. You live in Malaysia full time, the income you earn in Singapore or in your Hong Kong company or in your US rentals, that's not taxed in Malaysia. There was some talk that Trump would put that in the gold card to where, if you're coming from China and you have a bunch of business there, the US won't tax that. If it's not for that, then it's utterly ridiculous because who's paying $5 million to come and have their entire wealth sucked into the most laborious tax net on earth and to deal with the IRS? Who would want that? I mean, Malta will sell you a citizenship for 750,000 euros plus some fees. Call it $1 million at the door. You can live in 30 different European countries. You can travel as a European. Nobody hates the Maltese in these chaotic times. You arguably have much better consular services when you travel the world because you can use any of the European embassies. And I would say to myself, why would someone donate $5 million other than they're sucked in by the brand that is the United States and they want to buy the Louis Vuitton bag of countries? Malta for 80% less won't tax you, arguably better in every way for 80% less. The only reason you would pay $5 million, except for maybe a few people who are already there or they want to have US businesses, whatever, you would only pay that for the brand. I mean, how long does that work? How long can you bamboozle people to pay 5 times the price for an inferior product just by blustery marketing? Any of those people who come to me would quickly really realize, I mean, there are better options. And again, if that tax incentive isn't there, you're paying millions of dollars for the privilege of paying millions of dollars for the rest of your life. Because even if you get US citizenship, which Trump, the gold card was not citizenship, it was a path to citizenship.
Right.
And so it's not going to be as fast as Malta, but that's going to follow you no matter where you live. So if you're an American and you want to go back to China one day, good luck with your banks. Good luck with your investments. They don't want Americans. My banker in Singapore says, we'd rather have the rich Vietnamese guy than an American. The American's toxic because money's all the same. And there's plenty of money elsewhere now. So I mean, Malta they might do hundreds of passports this year. So this idea that Trump is, what did he say? He's going to sell 1 million or something. I mean, it's inconceivable. And I mean, how many people have $10 million to where half their net worth will be paid away? Right. I mean, how many decamillionaires in the world? I mean, 10 million or something? I mean, not even that, I think. I think there's under 1 million people with $30 million. And how many of them are already Americans? I mean, the math doesn't work. I don't think it's a great deal. Maybe for a handful of people if the tax incentive is there. But Trump's a great marketer. He's classic American marketing, and he's putting the word out, and he's keeping the country relevant. But it doesn't make any sense.
Well, there's really like a huge shift. But before I go to this next question, because we talked about taxes, the U.S. is the only country that no matter where you live, if you're a U.S. citizen, they're going to tax your income no matter where you're generating that income. So does that mean if you get a second citizenship someplace else, would you have to give up your U.S. citizenship, or would you want to give up your U.S. citizenship? And if you give up your U.S. citizenship, how easy is it to travel back to the U.S. when you want to?
So yeah, the U.S. and I think more countries will do it. I mean, France has very seriously talked about taxing their citizens no matter where they live. Australia has taken what I've predicted for years, kind of a backdoor steps to like, we're not going to tax you no matter where you live, but we're going to make it really hard to get out. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, it's harder to exit the tax system of countries that don't
Yeah.
tax you worldwide. And I think a lot of people, I mean, this is what our service is all about. People just leave the country and think everything will be fine. I mean, it's not that easy. But Americans are the explicit ones. No matter where you go, you have to pay, you have to report, you've got to tell us about all your foreign bank accounts. You've got to do it all. I mean, for a guy like me, I would probably, if I were still American, I would pay $50,000 a year just in American tax prep to run my business. And so it's laborious and it's stressful among anything else. If you run a business, you can pay probably in the single digits in tax. It's gotten more complicated in the last decade. And by the way, that's not a Biden or Obama proposal. That's a Trump law that made it more complicated. So you can pay in the single digits. If you have foreign business partners, potentially you can pay zero. If you run a business, but there's still restrictions on taking money out of that business. And so, if you want to move somewhere and buy a house for $1 million, that's going to be hard to do without paying a bunch of U.S. tax. You can live pretty frugally on the foreign earned income exclusion. You can take out your roughly $11,000 a month tax free, and maybe you've got a spouse. Maybe they can take out $11,000 a month tax free if they work in the business. But I mean, how are you going to go out and buy that piece of real estate? How are you going to go out and make big investments personally? You're not. And so you're always in that US tax net. So you can get the tax rate to 0 to 10%, let's say, if you're on a business, but there's going to be restrictions. If you have, Bitcoin, or if you're, capital gains, unless you're a professional trader where it is your business, you're just going to pay capital gains, dividends, all that is just going to be paid no matter what. So people who have passive income are going to pay. The solution is you can live in Puerto Rico, or you can give up your citizenship. And so the benefit for an American for tax purposes of having a second citizenship is the ability to give up your US citizenship, in my opinion. Now, there's other benefits. I mean, we've had crypto investors who've been our clients where they just need a second passport, and the crypto exchange just wants another passport. They don't care if you're also American, but they want to see that you're something else. Okay, there's other things. You want a country to go to, you want a backup plan, fine. You can do that with keeping US. But if your goal is just total freedom from the IRS, you're going to have to renounce. And so that's where a program like the Malta program, I think, is interesting because, yeah, you're going to pay close to $1 million. And I'm sure it's not the US government's favorite program that you could just go and pay. But Maltese can come to the United States with a visa waiver as long as you're not a criminal and you haven't gone to Iran, and as long as you haven't been to Cuba, you can come back. If you just renounce, on a St. Lucian passport, as I did, and I had others, but that's one of the ones I have that anyone can get, you'll need to apply for a visa. And that really comes down to where you live. I mean, if you're living a nomadic lifestyle in the Caribbean, I mean, there's a decent chance they'll reject you. If you live in Japan or Ireland or Germany or Singapore, there's probably a lot better chance because they're much less likely to reject people in those places. So there's a whole strategy of where you live after you give up U.S. citizenship. Most of our clients don't renounce, but we are seeing an increase in people wanting to renounce because I believe with all the trade wars and all that going on, if you're a global person, the U.S. passport is increasing. It's been toxic, but it is becoming more toxic.
It's been toxic. Can you go into that a little bit more? Because I think that's a pretty interesting comment.
Well, look at what Obama did. And you can see Trump did stuff I don't like. Obama did stuff I don't like. I mean, to me, the soul of the country is we want you to stay here. American exceptionalism. If you go somewhere else, you're weird. I had a friend, he got detained and they searched all of his laptops and his phones. They thought he was a child pornographer because he lives in Asia with his wife. His wife is not a 21-year-old girl. His wife is his age. They went to university. They're normal people. He lives a normal life. To them, Asia means child pornographer. We're checking your devices. We're canceling your global entry. We're going through every inch of your laptop. So they've done that. But if you look at Obama implemented FATCA, where it was always required to report your foreign bank accounts and your foreign investments. Now they went around and they threatened all the banks around the world. If you don't report the Americans, you're cut off. And so a lot of Americans got offloaded. The one thing Trump did do recently, which is good, is he made it to where if you're doing business in a country where maybe you got to grease a few palms, he made that, he's taken the teeth out of that. That's not how I like to do business, but if you're doing business in some of these far-flung places, you're probably not getting much done without greasing a few palms. And I just think that's wrong to dictate what citizens can do while they're overseas, even if I wouldn't operate that way. But I just think that there's a lot of regulations imposed on Americans who don't live in the country. I saw some statement from someone in the Justice Department, no one in the world is above the law of the United States. Well, everyone should be above the law of the United States if they don't live in the United States. Right. I mean, like some random guy in Ireland is supposed to know, who the hell do you think you are? I lived in the U.S. I paid my taxes. I followed the law. That's part of why I gave up citizenship. I just feel like you put one wrong number in the wrong place and they're going to come for you. And I want to do the right thing. But once I leave me the hell alone. Right. And it's not in the soul of the country. It's not about Obama or Biden or Trump. It's just not in the soul of the country. And people talk about U.S. consular support. They laugh at you when you call them overseas. I mean, the U.K. embassy is hosting a bloody afternoon tea for expats in some countries. You go to the U.S. embassy, they leave us the hell alone. So I just think that people around the world don't want to work with Americans. Banks, investments, crypto exchanges, brokerages. Americans are shut off from a lot of services. Now you have these trade wars. I just saw today in the UK papers, it's the US versus the world, and we're all going to find new trade partners. You don't think that's going to affect your business? You don't think that the US wanting to sell TikTok, both Biden and Trump at one point wanted to force TikTok to be sold. You don't think that anyone else is going to say, we can't trust the US, we're not going to invest there, and by the way, keep the Americans out because they're toxic? You really think, we really think that all these other countries are so flaccid and so afraid that they're just not going to say, we don't need 4% of the world's population anymore. We'll do it with the Brazilians and the Vietnamese and all of them together. We'll be together. People are not going to want Americans, and it's already happening.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing a huge shift with all of the tariffs and the way that Americans are thought of. I mean, years ago, yeah. Oh God, this would have been in the 90s. I traveled in France, and people were like, first of all, they'd rather have American dollars than at that time it was the French franc. And I was an anomaly because I was traveling in little known places, and I was a female from Arizona traveling alone. But today, I don't know what that would look like today. And I don't think I'm planning on doing it. Mm. But where do you think that you might be more accepted? How easy is it? I mean, I get this question a lot from people that are thinking that they're going to magically move down to somewhere in South America and be able to just have this expat community where you can be as independent, because I am really all about being, and I don't care what government it is, and I don't care what country it is. I think that we all need to be as independent and self-sufficient and inside of a really powerful and strong community that we can possibly do. So, but how long does something like that take to set up? Because it can't be instant.
It's a very interesting question, and I think it depends on the personality. I mean, I'll tell you what, my father, and here's the people who say, hey, you're going to leave your family behind. Maybe you've got to be the one who takes the first step. My father and my parents, they now spend half or more of their year in Mexico because they saw what I'm doing, and they said, yeah, you know what, we've been talking about this. Let's follow what Andrew's doing, and let's move overseas. And my father really committed himself to go out and meet a lot of people. Now, they chose to live in a more expat-focused community, and so he meets Americans and Canadians and people, and they live in a sort of an enclave. And he made that conscious decision to really be more sociable when he moved overseas. And I think sometimes, it's an opportunity to kind of come out of your shell by moving overseas. What I
Right.
found for in my case is even when I spend time in places like in Ireland, where you think, okay, well, that's pretty easy to get along with the locals. They speak English, and you have a lot of shared, culture. I found myself realizing I like to spend a lot of time alone, and I have friends all over the world. I had a birthday party recently, and about 18 people come from all over the world. They all
Happy
flew in.
birthday.
And I realized, I'm probably not going to be as social in one place, but I have a network globally. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think it's up to you to determine that. I think one of the things that I've found is sometimes the best way to fit in is by not fitting in and just going so far over the edge that it's actually comfortable. I live again, I live in Malaysia. I'll never be accepted as Malaysian, and yet there's a great acceptance there that I'm not Malaysian. I probably, am accepted more, and it was more comfortable being there during the pandemic and all that because I'm not Malaysian. And so there's an acceptance in almost we don't accept you as one of us, but we accept you as you. And perhaps let's just take the opposite of that. I mean, let's take a place like Ireland. I would argue if you live in Boston or New York or Philadelphia, Dublin is probably a more cultural fit than moving to Dallas or moving to Phoenix.
Hmm.
And you can lower your taxes a lot more as a non-dom taxpayer in Ireland than you can just getting rid of the state tax moving to Texas. But I think that perhaps there's this assumption that you don't have that much further to go to be adopted into Irish culture, for example. And so if you can make that adjustment, then I think you'll be very well accepted. If you can't, I think that it stands out more. How come this guy who looks and sounds like us doesn't make that leap to be more like us? Whereas, if you go to Malaysia, it's like this guy isn't one of us, and we kind of accept his eccentricities and that he's different, and we love that about him. So I think you can take it from one angle or the other. And I think you can choose, do I want to go and live in an expat community? And many of them exist. Or do I just want to go to a city and build my own community? Obviously, expats aren't all Westerners. I mean, if you go to, I was just in
Right.
Dubai. I mean, most of the foreigners there are from South Asia and West Asia and again, Eastern Europe and all over the world. Um, and so, what I found is I don't necessarily want to hang out with Americans just because they're Americans. I mean, some of the people that I hang out with are from Georgia, are from Serbia, are from all over the world, and they're very international
Yeah.
people, and we share values, and we speak English. Probably they speak English better than probably some Americans. So I don't know that looking for the Americans is the answer. And I think sometimes the idea of being accepted by not being accepted is perhaps something one should look at. But that's my view. I mean, my father went and he hangs out with Americans in Mexico, and he was never a person who thought he would ever live in Mexico.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I think an expat is from anywhere in the world. It's that community that, I mean, how do you find that community that shares the same kind of values and has the same kind of goals? How easy is that really to do for people?
I mean, this is one of the reasons why we started Nomad Capitalist Live, because we have 800 people who come in from around the world. And people have told us for years, I mean, this is the only place I can go where I can find people who share my values.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
It's a
it's
good
it's hard
point.
for me to answer because in some ways, what I've realized is I built a very successful business. I have multiple passports. I don't live in my birth country, and I will never go back, not even to visit. They probably don't want me back. I am in so many ways an anomaly. I am in so many ways the 1 or the 0.1%. And I think that, part of acceptance comes from yourself. And what I've realized is most
Yeah,
people aren't going to understand me. And I think if you're doing stuff that's different than most people aren't going to understand you. I mean,
boy, do I
so
know that.
that's why I started the event. So you can come and find people who share those opinions. I have friends who are interested in investing. You mentioned Cambodia. I've invested a lot of money in Cambodia. I've been fascinated by Cambodia for 19 years now. The average person think that's nuts. And so my question is, do I focus on appeasing all the people in the YouTube comments or that I meet in the street or that my extended family doesn't understand why you wouldn't want to own AT&T stock?
Right.
I think you realize I don't want to convince anyone anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I want to and that's part of why what we're doing at the event this year. I'm done talking about the problems. I'm done and in that way, Trump winning was a life was a lifesaver for me because I don't want to have to sit and talk about how bad Biden is anymore. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of Biden's stuff, but my goodness, can we just get to the solution? Because I've had it for
Right.
all these years. I've solved these problems that people are talking about in the U.S. Bloody hell, just like let me talk about the solution. Let's get past the problem. And I think you have to make that decision yourself that you're going to be weird if you do what I'm talking about. And yet, you know what? How many people? I had a guy who works for me, again in Ireland. He moved to Georgia. He lowered his taxes to 1%. And he said, I no longer have to have the people I grew up with bothering me with their problems that I no longer identify with. They figure, oh, that guy's long gone. I won't bother him with the latest trivial nonsense anymore. He said, it's been a lifesaver for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's not even about building the community. It's about we have communities by default where we're from. How many of your friends that you talk to in the country that you're from are only friends because you went to school together? And are you really aligned anymore? Give me two or three great friends, let alone 18,
Right.
but give me two or three people who understand and appreciate me for being who I am and being different. But all I can say is people love our event for that reason. They get to meet people who are like, yeah, I'm investing in Africa. Yeah, let's do it.
I am so excited. We've got the Nomad Capitalist live event that's happening on September 17th through the 20th of this year, 2025. And guess where? Kuala Lumpur. This is the world's #1 event for global citizens, where top entrepreneurs, investors, and thought leaders will share actionable strategies for protecting wealth, securing second citizenship, and navigating today's economic uncertainty. I'll be speaking at this year's event alongside Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, and others offering insights on how to stay ahead in a rapidly changing world. If you want to learn from real experts how to legally reduce your taxes and obtain a Plan B, this is where you need to be. Ticket sales launch today on April 15th, and you won't want to miss this. I'm so excited. I hope to see you there. This is great, and it's one of the things that I'm so excited about, getting to come to that event and participate in it with, an incredible roster of other people. I'm so honored that you asked me. Honestly, I'm so honored that you asked me. I do want to talk about one more problem, and then we can go to solutions, because what I believe we're dealing with is a global reset. And I know that you've talked about the reset, but I think that this is a monetary issue, and I think it's on a global basis. This is my $10 trillion Zimbabwe note that has no value. But there are 4,800 countries around the world that have gone through the same kind of thing. And personally, since there's virtually no purchasing power left in any of the currencies, this is no better really than that. It's just a little more accepted. The dollar is still a little bit more accepted. But this is a global, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong and we'll find out, but I believe that this is a global reset of the entire financial system. So where do you go to escape something like that? I think you escape it by having global money.
Here's the biggest challenge I see.
Okay.
Is people are like, oh yeah, where are you going to go? The UK? And listen, that's where like the celebrities go. And there's a big push of people who are already living in the UK. They're getting their British citizenship. I've said for years, if you live somewhere and you're entitled to citizenship, get it. If you have citizenship through ancestry that's possible, get it. People have Irish or Slovak or Hungarian ancestors. You can get citizenship that way. Claim whatever citizenship you can. And so I think that, most people watching are probably going to be more likely to have, Irish ancestors than African, ancestors. In Africa, it's probably pretty difficult to prove, which part of Africa and to get citizenship by descent that way. But one of the reasons why I'm bullish on places like Eastern Europe and Africa is They've been through the mess. They don't want to go through the mess again. The more options they have outside of the US, the more they're realizing those are the best options. I mean, look at the coups in Africa in recent years. Now, you can say those are dysfunctional governments, and you may have some valid points. What is a lot of that about? We're tired of the West. We're tired of being told what to do. We're tired of France establishing a currency and having this economic imperialism over us. We're tired of their military presence. Yeah, we side with Russia more. Yeah, we think China's a better partner. America first, great. What I always saw America first was, and everybody else doesn't get to be first. Africa, as a collective continent of I think 54 countries, has largely decided we don't want to be part of that system. And so if you want to get out of the system, you have to make changes. It's not about going to the UK. Now, listen, if you want to move to Dublin, Ireland, because that's going to lower your taxes and that's a place that you feel comfortable and you can get a passport and all that, fine, but have a backup plan from the West. If you want something different, you have to do something different. And I think that what I try and teach people is I can live in Kuala Lumpur. They're signing as we speak a home. I'm buying a larger home in Bogota, Colombia. That's my base in South America. I'm expanding my business there. I have places in Eastern Europe. I'm exploring more in the next 2 years, parts of Africa. I mean, those are the places that are going to be different. Not all of them, but I mean, they're charting their own path. It is not, I mean, even in the Caribbean, even in Central America now, more deals with China, less US influence. And so I think that, whatever your concerns about the West are, these other alliances are maybe going to have a different approach. I'm not saying move to China. But I'm saying that, some of these countries are more laissez-faire. I was in Turkey during the pandemic, much lighter touch, no matter what you want to call it. The terms are not the same. And so that's a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. There's a cultural thing of, people are going to do what they want to do to a certain extent. There's a culture of people are going to push back more. I don't know that you're going to, push back so much against the US government. And you're not going to push back as much against the Turkish government as you will a smaller country. But to people who are afraid of the world changing, you have to look at the alliances and you have to look at who's in which camp. And the countries that are the name brands that you've heard of, that you feel comfortable with, those are probably places you're comfortable with because they're pretty similar. Well, if you don't want the same result, you can't go to a similar place. Right. And so, I'm not saying your African passport should be your first, second passport. I will get another African passport this year through the investment program in Egypt. And, I'm pretty well diversified, but I think being able to have access there will be a good idea, as long as you plan out that it doesn't affect other things that you're doing negatively. So,
there's a really interesting thing that's happening right now. And I've really just honestly started digging into it. I have to dig into it a lot more. But it's a global issue, and I'm talking about stable coins, which are issued by corporations and are digital money. But 99% of all of the stable coins that are issued are denominated in US dollars. And these are being rapidly adopted by the public in these third world countries. And so they're trying to escape the currency that they're of that country. And you mentioned Africa, and there are a number of countries that are having some significant issues and doing some gold confiscation, even though they might not say confiscation. But in terms of that, and so really what the U.S. is doing is exporting dollars on a massive basis, not to the more sophisticated people that you're talking to, although if you're adopting stable coins, then that would probably be true. But they're trying to escape the currency that they're in, that they're seeing being inflated away so rapidly. And in my opinion, it's out of the frying pan and into the fire, because the only difference between their currency and our currency, the US dollar, is the speed at the moment of the devaluation. But boy, I can see that as like a wildfire when, and I can't say if, because it's not if, it's when. I've studied this stuff forever.
Yeah.
when the dollar does go into an obvious hyperinflation, because I also believe that that's already begun, it's just not obvious yet. I mean, wow. Can you kind of imagine how that would have an impact on the globe? Because you're trying to escape dollars and yet they're following you everywhere.
Well, yeah, and I think people can have diversified portfolios. I mean, I'm an advocate of that. I own real estate that I live in. I own gold. I mean, gold's at a 40-year high.
It's still
Bitcoin. I
undervalued.
mean, all things that's right. It's correct. I own things. I like to have a diversified portfolio, and I have fewer dollars, but I still have some dollars. For me, wherever you live, I mean, here's my perspective. Wherever you live, you don't have to hold that currency. I think that's a common misconception people have where, we had a number of people, they want to get the Turkey citizenship by investment. They felt like, okay, that's kind of something different. It's BRICS aligned. It's okay. That's a citizenship that I want. That's different. Maybe it's not the only one, but it's different. And people say, oh, well, what about the inflation in Turkey? Or what about the currency? I didn't say you have to hold the currency. I said, go and buy a property, get the citizenship if that's what you want. And if you look at, those properties, I own a property in Istanbul. I mean, it's gone up, I don't know, 7 or 8-fold in lira terms, and probably close to 2-fold, a little less in dollar terms since I bought it. Those properties in a wealthy neighborhood are largely going to be essentially dollar denominated, to your point, because wealthy people, they're not going to just let their $500,000 property be worth $100,000 because the currency went down. So I'm not saying you want to go to these countries and hold their currency. I'm not saying, you want to get an African passport and move all your money there. What I am saying is if you're not a U.S. citizen and you are a citizen of an African country, there are going to be some banks that don't want that, but you can go to Dubai and they've got some very strong banks and they will be more than happy to help you get an account that's, I would argue, more secure than many U.S. accounts. And you can hold your dollars there, or you can hold the equivalent to that, which is dirhams. I want people to diversify and go where you are treated best in every part of your life. And that includes whatever you believe is the strongest money. Do that while diversifying. Don't go all in on one place. Don't do what my parents talked about, because that's what you had to do back in the day, where they talked in the 90s about moving to New Zealand, and we would have just, moved lock, stock, and barrel. Don't do that. If New Zealand's not the best place to keep your money, keep it in Singapore, keep it in Switzerland, keep it wherever, you think is best in whatever format you feel is best. But, have options.
So are there, and I know there are countries that you can hold gold in the bank. I'm not sure how safe that is, because I don't know how much confidence I have in banks.
Yeah.
However,
at least they're thinking about it. Like, I respect, like, at least they're thinking about gold. But yeah, I mean, probably better to hold it.
Right. But it would make sense to have a place to go someplace else while you still can, and then maybe to hold some wealth there in another form.
I'm a big believer in tunnels.
Pardon me?
I'm a big believer in what I call tunnels. So years ago, I opened a bank account in, let's just say, Dubai, for example, and maybe I put in, $10,000. Well, now you've got an account. I mean, maybe that's the minimum deposit,
right,
but there's no maximum deposit. So if later, you sell a property, or you're saying, oh my goodness, that the US is falling apart, whatever, that account is there. It's a tunnel. It's not, being used to store millions of dollars, but you can move there. My point, and where I want people to look at this holistically, and what we try and talk about with our clients and at the event, is if you move $545,000 to a bank account in Dubai, they'll give you a 10-year golden visa. You never have to go there, but it's there waiting for you in case you think, hey, that's the place to go. So, there's different things you can do. Sierra Leone, okay, probably not the most attractive option for people, but you can get a lifetime residence permit by doing what? Buying gold. Now, that's a more adventurous option, but hey, I like that people are thinking creatively.
Absolutely.
You should look at, where can I move my money where they'll give me something for it?
That's a big key. And so why don't you could you tell our viewers more about how you help your clients create that diversity on a whole bunch of levels? We do it with our sound money.
Yeah.
Strategy, but how do you do that?
It's bespoke holistic planning where we have more options than anybody else. And basically, I left the US many years ago. I did not leave the US for tax reasons. Now, when I was a kid, I thought it was ridiculous that they had this citizenship-based taxation. And I always thought high levels of taxation were ridiculous. I've been a libertarian since I'm 13 or 14 years old. But the thing that pushed me to leave the US many years ago was not taxation. It was wanting to be a part of all the opportunities emerging in the world. And it was wanting to have a greater sense of purpose and a greater sense of being understood. I didn't feel like people in the United States understood what I was trying to do as much. So I found people who did somewhere else. And so along the way, questions came up. How do I handle taxes? All these things that you might ask yourself. And I had to figure it out myself. And I created a service where we provide more options than anybody because, you go to somebody who sells second passports, they might have 5 Caribbean passports they specialize in. And when you're selling hammers, everything's a nail, right?
Right.
What we try and do is we're sending people to some of these countries to say, hey, there's a law in your books that no one's ever saw. We hired a translator and we figured out there's some citizenship route no one's heard of. Can you clarify how this works? And we're talking to the government and finding legal ways to get citizenship in addition to all the dozens of ways people already know, because everybody needs a different plan. We have a guy, all he does is check up on every country's tax laws and what changed and what are the withholding rates on dividends and this and that. I mean, there's just so much to know. And we've built an entire team of 100 people. About 7 of them do research and development. And I don't know, 5 of them, I think, do client strategy. And about 28 of them execute client strategy once the plans are made. Everyone's plan is different. And it's kind of like, okay, you don't just want to move to Dubai. You don't just want a bank account. You don't just want a second passport. You probably want 5 or 10 different things that all work together. And then once you move to Dubai, did you think about this? Or what happens to your U.S. investments? We kind of like solve this all under one roof. We've got hundreds of lawyers and accountants and CPAs and real estate agents around the world. And we're kind of like the general contractor for all those people where we make the plan and then we execute the plan. And it's one-stop shopping where, people will come to us and say, I got a second passport. I paid $200,000. And let's say, okay, I don't see a need for that. I mean, maybe you didn't need to get that right away. Maybe you could have done this one for $10,000 and waited an extra year. And it's an advisory service where it's, here's what you need. Because I think that there's way too many people selling a single solution. Move to Dubai, all your problems are solved. Right. Well, I know a guy, and he was at one of our events a couple of years ago. All of his income comes from royalties. Well, he'd be better off staying in Europe because Europe has tax treaties with the US for royalty income. The UAE does not. He just figured tax-free Dubai for everybody. Well, not for him. His taxes went up.
Oh, wow.
And I think a lot of people, if you go to some guy where all he does is say, hey, I help people move to Dubai. They're a dime a dozen these days. They're not going to give you any reasons not to move to Dubai. Dubai is wonderful. Please come on in. I don't care if your taxes go up. Didn't you see here? We have 0% tax. Yeah, not on royalties. And so I think we try and help people with that and making sense of all the complexity because there's a lot. I mean, I've said when I turned 40, I said, I got to simplify because my life, I have a friend, he said, how do you have like 42 bank accounts? He's like, I tried to go down the street in Bali and get one bank account. I wanted to jump off, what he's like, it's how do you do it? It's like, I'm a masochist. But I found a way to take that masochism and put it in a database we have. And now we help people, benefit from my misery for the last 15 years.
That's perfect. That's really actually so perfect because these are questions that come to me all the time. And that is not my area of expertise, but it is clearly your area of expertise. And fortunately for us, your masochistic tendencies.
Someone will benefit from my I think, and I think they do.
Well, I'm more similar to your parents because I was also born in the 50s, so I understand what you're talking about. I personally find it a little more difficult, but I'm looking forward to our conversations, but only because I have children here, and that's where they are. That's where they're here, and I don't think they're prepared to move even though what I do, I could do globally, which is really nice. And I do love to travel and learn. So is there anything else that you want to tell our viewers that they should know, but we didn't talk about today? Because I have a whole lot of
No.
notes that we didn't have a chance to go
The
through.
five magic words are go where you're treated best. I wrote a book about it. The event is based around it. I mean, you want to look at your life in every way. How can I go where I'm treated best? We had a gentleman come up to me, I think it was at the last event last year. He came up to me at the end and he said, how I applied what you talk about is I moved to Colombia and I found the love of my life. He said, I never felt like I fit in the United States. But I moved and I got married and I'm like the happiest guy ever. And he said, thank you for go where you're treated best. It doesn't have to be about taxes. People think I'm obsessed with taxes. I run a business that helps people reduce their taxes legally, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. Bentley talks about cars. I talk about taxes. That's what we do. And yet, as a human being, there's a lot of emotion in this stuff for me that I think we try and help the clients with. It's not just about reducing your taxes. You have to be. I'm happier in the places that I'm living. I'm more at peace. I have better relationships. I have a lot of things that was a big part of the desire to leave, was to build that greater peace, greater happiness. That has to be part of the equation. So look at how you can go where you're treated best in every part of your life. Your banking, your money, where's your gold stored? What passport do you have? Where's your business incorporated? Who are your customers? We love our American customers, and yet obviously there's a lot of folks in the US who don't get it. More people in Mexico or Brazil or Vietnam get intuitively what we're talking about because of their history. You want to look at every part of your life and say, how can I go where I am treated best? And I think it's not about reducing your taxes or just getting a second passport. It is a life philosophy that you should practice every day.
That is a really good and very valuable point, and thank you so much for everything that you do. All of the contact information is below. It'll also be on the blog. And I cannot wait to meet you in person, Andrew. I'm really looking forward to it. So excited.
I'm excited as well. We're going to have a great time.
It's going to be fabulous. It's going to be fabulous. And I've never been to that part of the world because I probably have definitely done more of the legacy countries that you're talking about. So I'm excited to explore.
I think you're going to love it. And you're going to find, I think in many ways, Malaysia, I've said it's the United States of Asia, but only the good parts. They leave you alone. They're not so heavy-handed. But it is multicultural. You've got great food. You've got conveniences. I think when people come, they're going to love it. And people leave saying, I never expected it to be so great. So we're excited to have you.
And I am too. And we're definitely going to be blogging, not at the event itself, but all the things that we're doing around, we're going to be sharing with everybody. And, I'm thinking you and I can have some other conversations and we'll see how much of that we want to share. But thank you so much for this conversation and for the invitation and for all of your hard work, because a lot of people benefit, even if they don't call you, just from this conversation. What I'm really hoping is they start to look at things just a little differently, because I found in my long lifetime that every time I do that, I see something I never saw before. And that's really the opportunity that you're giving to me personally. And I really
Let me give you one more thing.
Please.
Yes, it's a pitch for the event, but it's something that people can take away. You want to take baby steps. How do I run my business? How do I run my life? One foot in front of the other. We have a banker that I've worked with in Malaysia for about 5 or 6 years. You can open an account with him. And then from there, you can open accounts in other countries in Asia through his bank. It's a non-Western bank. It's a big bank. And you can get started with him. Now, that's a little bit more expensive, his bank. We also have a bank from Georgia coming. It's the first time ever. And you can go. Now, they're going to talk about the private priority banking, $20,000. $20,000, you're a VIP. It's crazy. But you can also go to that bank and you can put like $100 in and get a bank account. So we're going to have both of those banks representatives. They're both strong, publicly traded banks at the event. And so my point is, even if you put $100 in a bank account somewhere else, there's a psychological effect of you're going to go and use the app, and it's going to be maybe better than your bank's app. You're going to go and use the ATM card. You're going to go. It's going to be just as good, if not better. And you're going to say, wow, I didn't lose my $100. And you're going to take step after step. I started by buying a property for $22,000. One of my first deals many, many years ago. I literally carried physical cash and handed it at the notary to the seller. Now we move, a lot more money around that without thinking too much. So you have to kind of build the reflex of saying, okay, let me take some steps in the right direction. Let me get a residence permit in a country I don't have to live in. I could just go to the embassy in my country. Maybe I go there for a day and activate the residence permit. Let me put a small amount that I'm comfortable with in some foreign country bank. Like, let me take these steps and I'll realize, wow, this is better. And I'll keep going.
I think that is such a powerful and true point. We do it the same way because even though this is legacy money for thousands of years, people have been taught away from it. And so it's just, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Move one gold coin to our place in Singapore. I mean, buy 1 ounce of gold and store it in Singapore. They charge you like, I don't know, a couple bucks a year or something. I don't know what it is. And it's like, okay, then go into the store and collect it. Just walk in and say, I'm here to collect my gold coin. I mean, just put yourself give yourself the opportunity to diversify in this way. And I think you'll realize, it's very safe and stable way to live.
Yeah, I wish I had you on the show a lot earlier than this, but hey, timing is everything. And thank you so much for being here today. And this was eye-opening, really. And I think we'll have to do some more things along the way to help people make sure that they are properly diversified and in a universal matter. This is not political. This is economic. This is a standard of living. And we need to do whatever we can to protect those things. So thank you again for coming. I cannot wait to meet you in person. And until next, I see all of you guys out there. Please be safe. Bye-bye.